My name's Diane Millette. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Registrar and CEO of the College of Health and Care Professionals, and I'm delighted to welcome licensees, staff, committee members, board members to this special event today. I'd like to start by just acknowledging that I am outside of the province today. I'm located on the traditional territories of the Peoples of Treaty 7 in Alberta, including the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina Nation, Stoney Nakoda, and the Métis Nation within Alberta. And it's a privilege to be here and be sharing this event from these lands today. So if you've seen Elaine Alec's biography in the invitation, you already have a sense of her very impressive background. So I won't repeat her accomplishments, but Elaine, we're so delighted that you were able to join us today. But I would like to say a few words about why we invited Elaine to be our special guest today and why we invited her to enter into this space with us. As a regulatory college, much of our relationship with the health and care professions that we regulate is based on the requirements to practice your profession in this province. Our focus is typically on what we are asking you as licensees to do, either for the college, such as quality practice, or for the people that you provide care to. But today's presentation is quite different. It's really about understanding and caring for ourselves. I think we're so fortunate at the college that we sometimes get the opportunity to hear various thought leaders outside of the world of professional regulation. And these speakers and leaders have often shared perspectives that can change how we think about ourselves and how to navigate the many challenges in the healthcare system that we all face today. And Elaine Alec is one of those voices. So quite simply, she looks at systems and decision-making differently. She recognizes that typical responses to the pressures and the increasing pace of change are inadequate and really calls for a more human-centered approach to care. So Elaine teaches that the capacity to remain in relationships when conversations become uncomfortable is really necessary to build collaboration, to build long-term trust and collective movement forward. So in a second, I'll hand things over to Elaine, but I would just like to note that this is not a conventional webinar format. We won't be using the chat or holding a Q&A session today. So for this session, all you need to do is listen and reflect on Elaine's stories, and we hope you enjoy the next 50 minutes or so. So with that, I'd like to turn things over to Elaine Alec. Welcome, Elaine.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I want to just start off by sharing a little bit about myself. I am a storyteller, so I share I teach and contribute to decision making through lived experience and storytelling. So I'm a talker, and I will often tell people I cannot do 15 minutes of questions because somebody will ask a question. It'll take me 20 minutes to answer one question. I do not do anything tight and succinct ever. I am constantly showing up with storytelling. So that's one of the things that I share. Just because I know there's oft a lot of things, a lot of questions will come up for folks. And I often say, don't do Q&A. And I don't do Q&A because I have a really strong belief that everybody has the answer inside of them. We've just been taught to doubt ourselves. We've been taught to question. We want external, that external person to tell us, yes, you're on the right track. This is what you should do, because we're so afraid to make decisions and make mistakes. And so we have this fear of making mistakes constantly and saying the wrong thing and being worried about all of these things. So I'm really going to encourage, as I move through my sharing today, is that if questions come up for you, write them down. write them down, and then at the end of the session, take a look at those questions that you wanted to ask me or other people, and then consider, can I answer these myself? Because I don't know you. I don't know any of you. And even if I do know some of you, because I think I have some family and relatives and nation members on the call, friends, I don't know your capacity at this moment in time. Everybody has different capacities at any moment in their life. Everybody has their own experiences and education. Everybody has these things that come up for them when it comes to making a decision. And so it really does come down to you and what your capacity is to make a decision on things, or to find an answer for something. And so there's deeper questions, I think, underneath those surface questions of like, am I asking this because I want to fix something right now? I see something's broken. I'm not comfortable with this, and I want to find a way to like act on it right now so I don't have to feel uncomfortable, because I don't like unknowing and uncertainty and discomfort. And that's what this framework teaches. This framework teaches us to have, it gives us the tools to be able to slow down and to be able to be in discomfort, to cultivate a sense of belonging, connection, and safety within yourself so that you can make good decisions. And sometimes that slowdown only needs 90 seconds. So it's not like I'm asking people who work under pressure, who need to make decisions in the moment, to like, no, let's wait and think about this tomorrow. We know that's not how life works. There are times when you do have to act and take action, but there's 90 seconds that you can take to slow down enough to figure out, are you in the space? Do you have the capacity to be making this decision right now? And am I making this decision from a place of fear and control, or love, trust, and faith? Which is that love, trust, and faith is that human-centered relationship space. And that fear and control is very much driven by, regulatory process, policy, agendas, all of those spaces. So I'll talk a little bit about that too. So I'm going to start off by introducing myself. And I share this all the time. I always get nervous. I've been a public speaker for like, I'm 48 now. So I first was asked to speak publicly when I was 10. So it's been 38 years of public speaking for me, and I'm a storyteller. I always get nervous. I always have to hold something to keep me grounded, to be in space, especially when I'm talking to so many people, because I'm always getting nervous. I'm like, I don't want to, I don't, this is important to me. And I want to make sure that what I'm sharing, is going to be something that is useful for the people who are in the space. So I always say that to share my humanness. Like, there, just that simple statement of like, I have a human emotion right now. I am nervous. And I'm putting myself out there as a vulnerable human being. That does something in relationship. It does something to the people who are sharing space with you, that you are a human being. You don't have to be a perfect performing machine who has all the answers. Doesn't matter what your title is or how high up you are, within an organization. All of the spaces I've been in, we all, as human beings, struggle with understanding how we fit into a space, how we belong, what that looks like. So I chaschalt tlachach tlahap slachlacht sin ksil chil michum chichamala estamia manimchil in chai squeeze tiknit kin silk sahwapm. What I said was, hello, good day, elders, family, friends, leaders, young people, two-spirit and non-binary folks. My name is Tikhanit, and I'm from the Syilx and Secwepemc nations. My name, Tikhanit, loosely translates into standing by water. What I said was, did I say the English piece already? See, I just start going. I said, hello, good day, elders, family, friends, leaders, young people, two-spirit, non-binary folks. My name is Tikhanit. My grandma gave me that name on the day that I was born, and it's one of our family names. And so somebody in my family had my name before me, and I was taught that every time we pass that name on, we get to carry on some of those characteristics and strengths and gifts of the ones who held their name before me. And then I get to add on to this name. And so the next person in my family who gets my name will carry on those characteristics of me, and we continue to live on through our names. Names are so important to our people. It was so important for my mom to help us understand who we were and what our names were. And and I share that with everybody. It's not just Indigenous peoples to Canada, that we all have names that come from someplace that have meaning. And sometimes we just think, oh, that's just our last name, or oh, that's just our name. But when you really start looking into your history and where your name comes from, what territory your name came from whatever part of the world you come from, you start to feel a different sense of identity within that. And so names are so important to us. I grew up on the Penticton Indian Band Reserve. I'm here right now. I'm in my grandma's house. I renovated my grandma's house to be my office. And if you've read my book, I talk about laying in bed with my grandma and her rubbing my back, telling me bedtime stories. Where my desk is right now is in my grandma's bedroom, where her bed was, where my grandma would rub my back. And so I've been home for over a year and a half. And I walk into this space, and every day I feel that sense of safety and belonging and love being here. And I have to think about that. And so that's something I'm going to put forward to all of you. I'll start to share my PowerPoint, my PDF, and I will share that with the organizers so that they can share I've already shared the PowerPoint, so please feel free to share it with everybody once we're done here. But I think about that. What do I need to feel belonging, connected, and safe? What do I need to feel belonging, connected, and safe? And that belonging, connection, and safety cannot rely on anybody else, right? It's not like, oh, my husband makes me feel safe. Oh, my dad made me feel safe. Oh, this person, it can't be external. It has to be from inside of you. What are the things in your life that help you feel belonging, connected, and safe? Some people say being in nature, going to the water, being with their pets. There's certain things that people like to do where they go into a space to feel belonging, connection, and safety. So I want you to think about that as we move through the day. So I grew up on the reserve my entire life. I moved away for about 10 years to live with my husband in Kamloops, which is his territory, my dad's territory, which is also my territory, the Secwepemc Nation. And spent a number of years there before coming back. And, I think about that feeling of being away from community. There was like a duality to my feelings of that. Like I felt safe being away from community. I felt a little bit more regulated being away from community, but I also missed being in community. Community was where I received my strength. Community is who taught me everything and who I am. Community is the one who loved me and wrapped me in their love, letting me know that even if we don't like each other, we still love you. Even when we're hard on you, we still love you. And so there's so much stuff that's connected to that. And I used to feel guilt for being away from community and feeling that sense of safety and security, that I should be able to do that back home. And so I had a lot of work that I needed to do to be able to come home and feel safe inside myself, feel that connection, belonging within myself without having to rely on other people to make me feel safe. And that's the thing, is that cultivating safe spaces is not about silencing voices you do not like. It's not about making people behave the way that you think a human should behave because you think it is right or good. And that is a mindset shift because we can't control people. And the moment we start putting things into place that controls people, it creates oppression. It's systemic oppression. and it impacts the way human beings show up when they feel controlled. And so how do we bring this framework into conversations like human resource policy and regulation, and regulatory spaces? Because these things are built off of that control, right? Like we need to control things because of, but how do we take a human-centered approach utilizing this framework to support whatever it is that we need to do? So when we come into a space and we think about how are we going to do this work, we often have questions about the action. What is the strategy? How are we going to put this forward? And so what I bring into this space are the conditions. These are the things that we want to see happen. But what are the conditions we need to cultivate in order for those things to happen? What are those conditions? What conditions need to be in place for us to be able to uphold those things that we want to uphold? So this is the Cultivating Safe Spaces framework. And I used to facilitate a process. I was taught in my early 20s how to Anawakinwich, and that is a Sealch decision-making framework that comes from our people, comes from one of our 4 food chiefs creation stories, and has been taught by one of our knowledge keepers and elders in our nation, Dr. Jeanette Armstrong. And I remember doing an Anawakinwich and utilizing the process, and I remember taking in the things that I learned from my elders and my family and how to gather and how to govern. And as the years started to pass, I started to recognize that it's not as easy to do this anymore. The world is changing. Humans are changing. Our human capacity has changed within a generation. We no longer know how to deal with hard things. Human beings are soft. We are so soft. We do not like being uncomfortable. We do not like having a hard life. We like comfort. We do not like not knowing what's going to happen. We absolutely require certainty. We need the answer in order for us to be able to move forward. I do not like it when somebody disagrees with me. I do not like it when somebody doesn't think the way that I think. I don't like them because I think they're harsh and I'm soft. I don't like them because they're soft and I feel more like a realist. Like we have all of these ideas of how things are supposed to be. And so then we start to promote exclusion because we don't want to listen to voices we don't like. I don't want to be in spaces where things are uncomfortable. Every time something goes wrong, we create a policy to fix it. Something happens, harm occurs. We don't like it. This feeling is uncomfortable. Somebody was hurt. We don't want to be hurt. We don't want this to happen again. So let's create a policy so this never happens again. We're going to create a policy so that people don't behave like that anymore. And then something else happens. And then we look through our big, gigantic binder of policies and say, where's the policy on this? How do we deal with this? Oh, there's not a policy. Let's create another policy to control human beings. And that's never going to work. It's never going to work because we are human beings. And human beings are going to respond and react based on the reality of their lived experience in that moment in time. And it's always going to shift. You never know. And so what we need is the ability to be able to show up when that happens, when mistakes happen, when harm happens. How can we be in that discomfort to be able to stay in relationship long enough to come up with a solution together and keep that relationship intact? Policies do not allow that to happen. Policy does not allow for that human relationship to happen. And so, I think about how do we start to, I'm not going to go there. I'm going to go back to the framework because like I said, I'm a storyteller. I could go on and on about this, but I'm going to get focused in on here. So in the middle of this diagram, we have the 4 necessary conditions for cultivating safe space. Cultivating safe spaces is not to control other people. It is not to silence voices we do not like. Cultivating safe spaces is an accountability framework. It is a framework that says everybody belongs. Like everybody. And that means that everybody belongs and everybody is accountable. So I like to push back on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Um, I am an Indigenous woman and my pronouns are she, they. And I'm going to push back on diversity, equity, and inclusion because I do not believe that everybody has a right to be in a decision-making space. I think we have responsibility on how we show up in a decision-making space. And so if you are in a decision-making space, you have a responsibility about how you're showing up to make decisions in that space. And in order for us to be able to do that, we have to have a strong understanding of self. Who am I? Why am I here? What is my purpose? How am I contributing? How do I understand myself? What are the things that are going to hold me back from participating in this space? You know, from my best self, being true to who I am and not conforming to fit. And so understanding self is a big part of this framework. I can talk about this framework for 10 hours. I can talk about understanding self and the four perspectives. And that's kind of what I want to focus in on today in the short amount of time we have together. Because this is ultimately about self-care. And what does that mean? What do you need to do in order to take care of yourself so that you can be your best? And it's not always comfortable. You know, it's a lot of hard work to be able to take care of yourself because we have a lot of stories that we tell ourselves that holds us back from taking care of ourselves and setting boundaries for ourselves. We have all these stories and how we show up in spaces. So I said at the very beginning, I wanted to ask, what do you need to feel belonging, connected, and safe? And why do I share that practice of asking those questions it's because this is how the brain works. The gold part of your brain is your executive brain. That's the part of your brain where you are effective and efficient. It is where you are regulated. It is where you make good decisions. It is where you are solutions based. And that is the part of your brain where you're at your absolute best. The second part of your brain is the limbic system. This is what we also call the emotional brain. So this is the part of the brain that's responsible for emotional responses. And when you are in your emotional brain, you cannot learn, retain information, or be reasoned with. So every human being's brain functions like this. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. You know, it doesn't matter what part of the world you come from. It doesn't matter how much money you have in your bank account. None of those things matter. This is the way a human brain works. So what forces somebody to move from their executive brain into their limbic system, into their emotional brain? It is the feeling of not belonging. It is the feeling of not feeling loved. Two basic human needs: belonging and love, connection. So this is when I start to challenge people. How many times do you walk into your meeting in a boardroom and do you feel belonging and connected and loved in that space? And so if you do not feel belonging and loved in that space, you know, okay, loved is pushing it. How much belonging do you feel in that space? So I'm going to share the word colonial. I try not to use this word anymore, but I use it in cultivating safe spaces. And when I say colonial, it means something specific for CSS. And in CSS, it means anything that comes from a place of fear and control is colonial. Any decision that I make, any agenda I create, any policy I create, any rules, anything that I create, a process that comes from a place of fear and control is upholding colonial systems. And so if I want to do the opposite of that, I have to do things from a place of love, trust, and faith. So when I think about the emotional part of the brain and that belonging piece, are people coming into a space feeling loved, trusted in that space? Do they feel human in that space? So that's a simple way to lay it out, because colonization has done a really, really good job of making every single person believe we have to be perfect performing machines here to do the job, never making mistakes, always prepared, and knowing all the answers. And so we have dehumanized ourselves and we believe we have to be these perfect performing machines. We're not allowed to have humanness in a professional space. We're not allowed to have humanness. We have to be perfect. We are not allowed to say the wrong thing. We're not allowed to make mistakes. And so every time we step foot in a boardroom, you are expected to be a machine. You are expected to be perfect. You are expected to have the answers. You are expected to be prepared. And so the moment you step into that space, there's no humanness there. Because humans are allowed to make mistakes. Humans are allowed to have emotion. Humans are allowed to not have an answer, no matter what your title is. Because nobody, our elders would just laugh, like nobody knows everything. Like, surely you know that, right? Like, surely you know deep inside of you that it is impossible for you to know everything. That is why we have each other. That is why we have each other. And so when I walk into a space, do I feel belonging, connected, and safe here? Because if I don't, I am going to move to the part of my brain where I cannot learn easily, where I cannot retain information, and I cannot be reasoned with. And so you can't have conversations. You cannot move forward. You cannot make good decisions when you're functioning from that part of the brain. The third part of the brain is the brainstem, and this is the part of the brain that we also call the trauma brain, the then and there part of the brain. This is the part of the brain where we are negative and cynical and hopeless and helpless. This is also the part of the brain where this is also the part of the brain where we're burned out. And these are some examples of what a human will behave like when they're functioning from the lower part of their brain. So you could have a decrease in quality or quantity of work, low motivation. You could be avoiding tasks, obsessed with detail, setting perfectionist standards. You might be forgetful, have difficulty paying attention. You could have a decrease in confidence or interest, a negative attitude. I always laugh at this because negative attitude is misspelt in here, and I've never changed it because I don't want to. I'm like, this is an example of me being okay with a spelling mistake, even though it bugs the crap out of me. I'm going to leave it. Negative attitude, dissatisfaction, demoralization, feeling undervalued and unappreciated, disconnected, reduced compassion. Calling people out, arriving late, overworked, irresponsible, have poor follow through. You could be detached or withdrawn from coworkers, have poor communication, conflict, impatience, intolerance of others, and a sense of being the only one who can do the job. So when we see this, we look at this and say, oh, that is a problem employee. That is a problem colleague. That is a problem client. They're always doing this. This is how they're behaving. They're poor communication. When people are functioning from their trauma brain, they are not solutions based. So even though they know what is in their heart, they cannot communicate it with words. You cannot find the words. How many times have you been in that position where you're like, there's something going on here. I've experienced this thing, but for some reason I can't explain it. And now I'm frustrated because I can't prove, I cannot validate my experience right now. And so there's no point in me bringing this forward if I cannot prove it. And so this is what happens when when you're in that space of that, I'm frustrated because I just can't communicate. Nobody's listening to me. That is an indicator you're functioning from your trauma brain. When people see behaviors like this, they think problem. They think that person behaving like that is the bully. That person is the problem. That person is toxic. That person is all these things. And instead of trying to figure out why or where that's coming from, we write them up. We pull a policy for it. We try to control their behavior so they behave the way we think that they should behave. But these behaviors are indicators that that person does not feel safe. They do not feel like they belong. They do not feel connected. They do not feel loved or respected. And that's tough because, I mean, you look at what's happening in the world today with this extreme space, it's a whole bunch of people who do not feel like they belong. And they're trying to find ways to belong. And sometimes we don't like the way that looks because it's harmful. You know, some of the narratives are really harmful. And it's really hard for me to move into that space of judgment when I'm thinking like, wow, that is an extreme case of somebody who has spent their entire life feeling like they don't belong. So when people feel belonging, connected, and safe, they function from their executive brain. And so when we look at the way that we work with each other and at a human-centered, relationship-based approach, how are we going to do that through policy? How are we going to do that through decision making? And how are we going to come to an agreement that we have to learn to sit in discomfort? Change does not happen in your comfort zone. And so if we keep trying to create conditions for comfort, we are always going to have problems. Nothing is ever going to change. And so humans have to start building up that adaptive capacity within themselves to be able to navigate that discomfort, navigate that uncertainty, navigate when mistakes are made so that we can continue to move forward together. So understanding self, who am I? Who is your name? Who are you? Who do you belong to? Some people say, I belong to myself. I've never belonged anywhere, but I belong to myself. You know, some of that's trauma, I think. And it's like easier for us to make that claim than to really deal with the why we've decided that that's it. I'm the only one I can count on. And there's very real reasons for that. I don't want to be hurt again. I'm afraid that I will be hurt again if I open myself up. And so understanding self, who am I? How am I showing up in this space? What am I good at? How do I do this work? How do I contribute in a good way? And what do I need in order for me to be able to work at my best based on who I am instead of trying to fit in? Because every time you try to fit into the way other people do things, you're always going to feel like you're not enough. You will never feel like you belong if you're constantly trying to show up in spaces being somebody you are not. And so understanding self. Who am I? So many times I sit in circle with people and they're like, oh, I thought that was going to be an easy answer. I thought I knew how to answer that question. And I just spent the last 2 years thinking about that. It's so beautiful. I have some people tell me they went back to their homelands, their ancestral homelands. Somebody went back to England. Somebody went back to Scotland. Somebody went back to New Zealand and they come back and they share these stories of like, or sometimes they reconnect with a family member to ask questions about that. There's a whole bunch of different ways people do that. Some of it's literal, of like, I'm going to find that connection, belonging, and safety through family ties. And sometimes that's hard for people because of disconnection. Some people have been adopted, some people have been removed. And so there's a whole other story and journey that they have to go through. That is their journey of that. What is my path to belonging, connection, and safety for myself? So when I think about how I show up in a space, I think about traditional relationship innovation and action. Traditional perspectives are people who are like me. We like to share our lived experience to contribute to decision making. I can talk and talk and talk. I have no sense of time. And so sometimes people think, oh, that person, they just take up all the time. I can talk for 20 minutes and think I only talked for 5. I don't mean to take up that much space. I understand myself enough to know that I need a big red clock, and I put timers on my phone so that I can keep myself on track, because I know I talk a lot. I understand that about myself. I understand what I need to be able to contribute in a good way. And so I also have to understand what I need to feel belonging, connected, and safe. I no longer see that as a problem. When I was a kid, people told me I talked too much. When I hit my 20s, I started getting a feeling bad grabbing the microphone because people told me I took up too much space. And so it was a bad thing to be a storyteller, to take up too much space, especially when you're in an action space. We got to get things done. What does that story have anything to do with the work we're doing here today? I understood how this story was answering the question that we needed to take action on, but nobody else understood it. And so I had to figure out how I was going to show up in spaces and contribute in a way that felt good for me and still was part of a collective. And that takes understanding self. Relationship perspectives are the ones who care about connection. They don't want to leave anybody behind. They want to make sure everybody's included. They do not care how long a process takes. Innovation people are the systems thinkers. They are the systems changers. They need time to process. They need time to think. They need time to ask questions. They will often apologize for rambling. You cannot measure their contribution. I can guarantee almost every innovation person that works within an organization, a structured organization, struggles because they cannot capture their work that they do in their head on paper, and claim it on a timesheet. But I bet you they're going home and thinking about it. And they're going to bed thinking about it. And they're waking up and in the shower and they're thinking about it. And they're thinking about all of the information and all of the things that they've heard. And they're trying to find a way to communicate it back in a way that everybody else can understand. And so I'm a lot of neurodivergent people identify as innovation. And so how do we cultivate belonging, connection, and safety for innovation perspectives to truly show up in a way that works best for them? Do not throw them in a brainstorming session, a 2-hour action session. You won't get the best of them. And just because someone asks questions doesn't mean that they're challenging authority. Just because someone asks questions doesn't mean that they don't trust you. Just because someone's asking questions doesn't mean they're trying to slow you down, or it doesn't mean they don't get things. That is how they contribute. They ask quality questions. And it might not look like it fits in this time and space, but it does. And so don't parking lot anything. People like to parking lot things because, oh, it doesn't fit. But I promise you, people aren't just saying things. People don't just open their mouth and contribute in spaces to waste air. And the more we start to understand and value people for how they show up in a space, the more we start to be inclusive, the more we validate people, the more we promote freedom and well-being of those different perspectives and how they show up. It can't be one way of seeing things. And just because it doesn't make sense to me, just because I do not think it's important, and just because I do not get it, does not mean that it doesn't fit. And so action people are the leaders. They get things done. You know, they're very they're very outcomes based. And so they like to take action. And there's a very clear path on what this looks like. And we're going to come together and we're going to create an action plan. And this action plan is going to be implemented by our entire team. And we're going to spend $120,000 with a facilitator and a consultant and everybody to come in to do this plan. And then we're going to sit there and a year later, we're going to say, how come nobody's doing anything with this plan? I don't understand this. Oh, I know what we need to do. We need to do an implementation plan. But we wouldn't need to do an implementation plan if we had incorporated all of those perspectives. Action plans are usually done from an action lens, and it's made for one audience. And so I always challenge people, if you can look through your strategy or if you can look through your documents, and if everything makes sense to you, it is not inclusive, because that document was made just for you, your priorities, your understanding, in a way that helps you move things forward. And teams who are diverse, of different perspectives, they don't necessarily know how to action that, because they're coming in from an innovation perspective, because they're coming in from a relationship perspective. So my challenge is, if you can go through your company document or strategy, and if there's parts of that strategy you do not understand, that means it's inclusive. That means you also have to practice being okay with not understanding something. And that's tough. It's like, I should, though. I should understand everything. I should know how to do this so that I can make sure things are moving forward. That's where that trust piece comes in. That's where really relying on the people who are in the space of how they're going to move things forward, even if it doesn't make sense to us. And how much time do we waste trying to get everybody to understand things and get on the same page? As long as we have shared language and shared understanding and alignment of an end goal, it shouldn't matter how the team is moving forward. And so understanding self in those four perspectives are so important. Which perspective do you think you are? You know, and so the relationship and the action and the tradition, people are like, oh yeah, that's me. Right away, I knew that was me. A couple of people might be like, oh, well, depends on the situation. I might be, you know, with my family, I'm different. I need to get more information before I make a decision about this. If that's the thought process you're going through right now, you're probably innovation. If you're still asking questions and if you're still thinking about it, you're probably innovation. And if you do not like to be labeled, because you can't be defined, you're so complex, you're probably innovation. Yes, you can have two dominant perspectives that are opposite of each other, but one of them does become dominant when you make a decision. And so how do you make decisions? How do you work with other people? Because the thing about cultivating safe spaces and self-care is that nobody is going to do it for you. Nobody can make you feel safe. Nobody can make you feel belonging. You are the only one who can do that for yourself. You know, you can have the best policies, the best process, everything laid out, the best team. But if you don't have things dealt with inside of you, you're always going to have problems. Things are always going to be a struggle. You're always going to look at things from a negative lens. Like, it is that internal mindset of how I show up. What is my responsibility and how I'm showing up in this space? So that fourth necessary condition that I have on that diagram, the fourth is discipline, and that's the discipline to listen. Can you listen with discipline to all voices, whether you agree with them or not? Can you listen without judging what people are saying as right or wrong, good or bad? Can you just listen? We don't know how to do that anymore. We listen to be right. We listen to respond so that we're not misunderstood. We do not know how to listen for information. We are so quick to get triggered. We are so quick to be offended. We are so quick to respond from that place of emotion and trauma. And so, what do we need to do to be able to slow down and say, okay, why is my body responding in this way? I have heard something and now my body is responding in this way. So, when you listen with discipline, you have to have a strong understanding of self because you're going to have to understand that, oh, temperature's raised. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling offended. I'm feeling something. Where is that coming from? Why do I feel that way? Does that have anything to do with what's happening in this moment? How do I get myself regulated in the here and now? Because the thing is that a dysregulated person cannot regulate another dysregulated person. So a lot of it is like people wanting me to teach you how to control people's bad behavior. That's why people bring me in. They're like, we have problem patients, or we have like, how do we control that behavior? What can we do? And it's like, or, I work in emergency response operations centers, and I work with firefighters and, people who are people who are, bringing in fire and flood victims. And so it's like, this is the thing. Somebody has to make a decision to regulate themselves in that moment. And if you have chosen to be in this space, that is your responsibility to regulate yourself. If you have a choice, you choose, you're not stuck. And so if I'm choosing to be in the space and all I'm doing is complaining about how toxic the space is and all the problems, I'm a part of the problem. I am part of that toxic space. I am choosing to be in this space, and I understand all of the challenges that come with working with highly traumatized populations. This is how it impacts them. This is what it does to their brain. This is how their behavior is. And I cannot do anything to control them or make them behave better so that I feel safer, so that I feel good about where I'm at. I understand that this is my calling, this is my purpose, this is who I am, this is what I bring into this space. It's going to be hard and I'm going to be uncomfortable, but what do I need to do to cultivate belonging, connection, and safety for myself so I can be my best? So I can function from my executive brain and make good decisions. And I have to understand myself enough to know when I cannot. And so, what support do we have in place for each other when we cannot show up? When am I able to show up in a space without being judged for being human? Like, I have been pushing it. I am good. I am at the brink. But if I go in there today in my dysregulated state and I know today is not the day that I can do this, what can I do? What space can I step into to cultivate and regulate myself? Cultivate that belonging, connection, safety for myself so I can regulate myself. Even if it's just for a moment. What is that signal? Me and my daughter have a code word. It's reset. I am a 48-year-old woman going through perimenopause with a 16-year-old daughter going through puberty. Do I have to say anything else? Somebody has to make a choice on how to get regulated. Otherwise, we are both the problem. And so now, my daughter is now traveling with me and facilitating with me as a 16-year-old because she now understands this framework. And she now understands when mommy behaves like that and when mommy's impatient and when she's behaving like this, I'm not the problem. Like, how beautiful is that to not pass that on to our kids when we don't know how to regulate ourselves and it bleeds out onto other people around us that they don't take responsibility for how we behave. And so I'm not going to take responsibility for how it's uncomfortable. I don't like it when people raise their voice. It impacts people in different ways. If somebody grew up in violence, if somebody grew up where raised voices was not safe, if people grew up in spaces where certain movements impacted them a certain way, their threshold for being in that space and staying regulated is going to be different. And they're going to have a lot of work, internal work that they need to do to be able to show up as their best self. People who show up in helping professions, that is their purpose. That is their calling. It does not pay well. It's like if you are taking jobs like this, it is because that is your purpose. And so when people behave like those negative characteristics that we call problems, what are we doing to identify that? And how are we going to cultivate belonging, connection, safety for people? What can I do for myself? Because I'm going to walk out there into this world and things are going to happen. People are going to be racist. People aren't going to like me because I'm a woman. People aren't going to like me because I have tattoos. People are going to have a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with me, and I cannot change them. I cannot shame them into being a better human. I can't spend the rest of my life going around trying to control people. I need to be able to show up as my best self. Somebody has to make a decision in that moment to regulate themselves. That is self-care. That is understanding self. Who am I? And what do I need to do for myself to be able to show up in my best capacity? And do I understand myself enough to be able to communicate that capacity to other people? This is what's happening with me in my human life. I bring this into my team meetings. We're very action in this new company that I'm working with. Very like, let's be innovative in action. And this week I had to be like, I need to do a human update. I'm 48. I have been traveling hardcore for 2 months back and forth to Ontario, and I'm not used to the time zones anymore. I can't handle it. My inflammation has flared up again. I have rheumatoid arthritis and fibromyalgia. My pain last week was at an 8 and 9. It makes me cranky. Being in pain makes me cranky. I am bitchy. People don't like being around me when I'm in pain and uncomfortable, but I've had to recognize that this is going to make me behave in a certain way. I'm going to let you guys know if I'm impatient or if I'm not making sense, or that's because I'm in pain right now. This is what's happening. Something's happening. Me and my daughter, we're usually good at getting along, but this week has been hell. And so I'm going to do my best to show up and cultivate this belonging, connection, safety for myself so I don't bleed all over my colleagues, but I'm human. And so I might not have the capacity to write a really thoughtful email. I might not have the capacity to send like a heart emoji, with my ask of you. It might be just like, I need this from you by the end of the day. And you might be, if you're a relationship person, you're going to be like, oh, they're so whatever. I have all these made up stories about people and how they communicate with me and how I get offended by people's behavior. But we're all different. We all show up in spaces with different needs and different capacities, so I can handle hard places a lot of time now because I've dealt with my crap. I've identified, oh, it's actually not this person that's like, they're not the problem. They are not as like the mean person that I'm making them out to be. It's this one behavior that triggers a memory. And this is the story I tell myself about that. And that's mine. And now I'm able to have a conversation with them. So cultivating safe spaces is the ability to show up human and in relationship with each other, and not having it come back on you. People need to be able to be human. We need to start cultivating cultures and creating cultures where people have permission to be human. And once we start practicing that, how it changes for people. Listening with discipline. People know when they're being listened to, and people know when they're being dismissed. People know when they're being listened to. People know when they're being dismissed. And when people feel dismissed, they do not feel like they belong. They do not feel connected. They do not feel loved or respected. And sometimes the things they say are going to be hard to hear. But every time we shut them down or tell them they're not important or tell them we don't talk like that here. You need to control your emotions. We're telling somebody their humanness doesn't belong there. I work in children and family spaces too, where I work with family negotiators, family people who bring families into spaces, and they have all these rules about how you're supposed to behave in space. And it's like it's stifling that humanness. It's like people need to be able to be sad. People need to be able to be angry and bitter. People have a right to their feelings and emotions. They don't have a right to, bleed all over everybody else in that. But do we have the capability to allow people to be human in space with us, even if it's uncomfortable? Can I cry here and be angry and then be human for a little bit and see that you're still there in relationship with me? Like, okay, maybe it's okay for me to be here. It's okay for me to express myself in this way. And now let's come up with a solution, because like I shared, it takes 90 seconds to move from your trauma brain back to your executive brain. So what can you do in 90 seconds to cultivate belonging, connection, and safety? Just taking that breath, looking around. Where are you? Where am I? I am not in the then and there. I'm not in that story that I'm telling myself. I am in the here and now, and I am safe. And in some cases, it's not. Some cases, if I'm thinking about situations when you're in a helper profession, no, sometimes it's not safe. I share these things thinking like, apply this where needed. And it's not a set framework. You are the one that completes the framework. That's why I can't answer questions for you. Like this is a foundation and a language that people can pull from to help them understand how to navigate the situations that come up for them. What can I do now? How can I cultivate this for myself so that I know how to respond in these spaces? So I think I'm going to end there. There's so much. I love being in space with helpers. I love supporting helpers. I think there's so much work that needs to be done in the healthcare profession. Like I said, I've been a part of the health system since I was a kid. I've dealt with alcoholism, chronic pain. I've been in and out of the hospital most of my life. I have family. And so it's not working. The system is not working, but the people inside it are the ones that matter the most. And so I'm going to end with something Grand Chief Stewart always says whenever we're in space with government. We have to be hard on systems and soft on people. We have to be even the people you cannot stand because they're just human working within an oppressive system just like you. And you may notice that I haven't brought up, race into the space. I don't do cultural safety because we have a human problem. And you cannot teach people how to value others and see them as human if they don't know how to value themselves and see themselves as human. And so reclamation of our humanity within our systems is so important to shift it, and being uncomfortable and being uncertain is what is going to be required for us to make great change. So do not expect to change a system with comfort. Prepare yourself and build your adaptive capacity to be uncomfortable, because it's worth it. It's worth it for everybody that comes after us. So thank you for having me in this space. I appreciate each and every one of you for everything you're doing. You do not have to do it, but you're there. And there are people who really, really, really value you. And I hope you know that on your hardest days. White Lim Lim.
Oh, wow. Uh, Elaine, thank you so much for such a thoughtful and generous presentation. So many of your messages struck me. I'm really not sure where to start, but beginning with your idea of slowing down, being in discomfort, making to make good decisions, even if it's for 90 seconds, is something that will stick with me. I think another key message is the importance of self-care, belonging, connected, and safe so we can be our best. I think you reminded us of something we all know, but too often forget that taking care of ourselves isn't a luxury, it's really a necessity, especially in the work we do with people. And we have a choice to regulate ourselves, and we need to regulate ourselves. And I think, regardless of our role, we all are humans. We all make mistakes, and you've given us lots of gifts today to take away and reflect on. So thank you on behalf of all of us here today for your time, your lived experience, and sharing your wisdom with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.